Hey everybody, how's it going? Andrew here, and I just have a quick and simple favor to ask of you. And that is, if you're a fan of the show, then share it with someone you know. That's it. If you really find this helpful, or whatever it might be, if you check those boxes, if that's doing it for you, then share it with someone you know. So again, if you're a fan of the show, share it with someone you know. That's it. That's all I got. Let's get to the show. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Indie Game Movement, the podcast that talks about the marketing and business of indie games. I'm Andrew Pappas. I'm going to be your host today, and we're going to be talking about the future of advertising games and creating micro content. So the world of game marketing is a shifting landscape. In recent years, have shown a trend toward short-form content for advertising, communicating, and selling video games. Today, we'll be discussing some of those trends, effective ways to employ them in your projects, and other concepts to keep in mind when tackling. Hey everybody, and we're back, and today with us, I have Roberto Pisati. Roberto, how's it going, man? And thanks for being on the show.
All good, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you for having me here.
Yeah, of course. So for those of you who don't know, Roberto is the founder of Level Up Ads. They do a lot of advertising and other services for, the video game space, for indie games and all that stuff. And they're leading in kind of like cutting edge marketing techniques. And I know that doesn't say too much, but don't worry, folks. We're going to get into that with this discussion today in terms of how it's cutting edge and how you can kind of use some of these strategies that we're going to be talking about. So really cool there. And also, Roberto here has extensive developer experience, some insider knowledge, being a developer and being in the industry for lots of years. So again, can't thank him enough for being here. And Roberto, in light of all that too, I'm sure there's things when you do have some free time that you like to do. And I understand that you're really passionate about music, but could you elaborate a little bit further about that?
Yeah, so I don't know. It's just one of those things. Since I was very young growing up, music has always been a big outlet for me. So I was in my early teenage years when I picked up my first guitar and, went through all the stereotypical exercise of, playing with friends and, being rock bands and stuff like that.
Yep.
Growing older, I started to fancy something different and then had a go at the trumpet, played that for a few years. And now that I'm even older, I suppose, I have a new hobby again, which is a drum kit that I picked up during the pandemic. So we were in a lockdown, not much else to do, I suppose, being stuck at home. So I have a digital drum kit that I play. Allows me to isolate from everything else, all the stresses, all the things that are going on outside, and just let me be me and do my thing, I suppose.
Awesome. So definitely thanks for sharing that and learning a little bit more about you and what you do in your spare time. But in that light, we're going to now go into the Q Box round, which is just a series of quick random questions I've prepared for you.
Sure.
And so are you ready?
I am indeed.
Awesome. So first, what's the most helpful or impactful advice you've ever received?
Okay, it probably wasn't even meant to be an advice, but I've always been into healthy eating and exercise and wellness and stuff like that. And in my early 20s, I went through a phase in which I was really obsessed with clean eating. And one day, a friend of mine just told me, "Look, man, you're living like a sick to die healthy," and that's something that annoys at the moment, and it wasn't probably even meant to be an advice. But yeah, it's, growing older, I suppose I started to appreciate the truth in it. And the fact that, high achievers, I suppose, or people that have high standards from themselves and want to do their best and, try to achieve the more possible, often get stuck into perfectionism and they end up missing the point. And they chase and chase and chase, something that is probably not even possible, just for the sake of being the best. And they end up, missing the enjoyment of the experience. And that's something that to this very day, when I do stuff either for work or personal projects, I try to keep in mind all the time.
Nice. So another one is here, what's one habit that you have that has contributed to your success?
If I had to say something is routines. I'm very good at building routines, and for some reason, maybe it's OCD again. I like doing the same things again and again and again. And I have a morning routine. I get up and exercise every morning. I get my healthy breakfast. I get my water in. I have start work routine. Every time I hit my desk, I have my sequence of things to do that gets me going without procrastinating or wasting too much time with news or social media or stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I really understand that they are not exciting, and a lot of people don't like them for that reason. But I love them because they become effortless, and they definitely keep you moving forward.
Yeah.
So you just need to line them up with your goals, and then you kind of go with them.
Love it. Yeah. Maximize that time, resource, and kill everything else, so to speak.
Yeah.
Awesome.
For sure.
And last but not least, and the staple here on the show is, what game are you playing now?
Ooh, touchy point. I'm a bit ashamed to say I become a bit of a dabbler at this point. I still do download and play games. It's mostly, I have to say, for project work. So whenever I have a new client, whenever I work with someone, I download their game. I try to get a feel or the experience of playing that particular game. Mm-hmm. So in the last couple of weeks, I've been working on a game that is on the line of Rimworld. So it's a survival, sort of a colony management strategy game. Mm-hmm. It's called The Ascent of Ashes, and it will be coming out at the end of the year. So it's an early stage, but I had to go with that.
Cool.
To defend my nerd pride badge, I suppose, I can say that I have a Raspberry Pi that I set up with a retro gaming simulator. So every now and again on a weekend, I pick that up and I have a go with, either Nintendo old school gaming or, the Windjammer kind of a, style games. So, there is still an element of that, even if I'm 44 now. So.
Yeah, I can relate. I have my mini SNES hooked up into my desk setup. It still rarely gets used, but it's there in case I have that minute, and I could just plug it in, switch the screen, and I'm good to go. Everything's there, so I could relate. Sure. Cool. Well, thanks for sharing that with us. And before we get into the discussion, folks, I just want to call out that Roberto does have a special offer we'd like to extend exclusively to our listeners. So stick around and we'll share that to you in the end. But first and foremost, we're here to talk about kind of the future of advertising games and creating some micro content, a lot of cool stuff that we're going to dive in right now. And to kick that off, I want to lead with this question where why do you think, or why do you believe we've grown in the direction of micro content, especially for game marketing? Do you think it's here to stay?
Yeah, so I'll probably start taking a step back and just clarifying for everybody what I mean for micro content, because it's not necessarily a unique sort of a definition sort of a thing. So in my world, micro content is essentially the idea of producing short clips, short videos around the 30 seconds, maybe 40 to 60, maybe up to a minute length of video, and posting them on social media at a higher frequency. So that leverage two essentially elements. The first one is that attention spans are shortening. That's a phenomenon that is just happening because of the lifestyle we live in, and we have been living in the last 20, 30 years. And then the other thing is that, the world is noisy. So if you post at a higher frequency, essentially, you get a better chance to get discovered. So with that out of the way, I guess we got to micro content, or this style of content, because, well, first, video content has been a massive trend for a number of years in marketing. And that's, again, something that is across all industries. People rely a lot more on video content. Then the content has become shorter and shorter, or bite-size, if you want to call it so. And then again, it's something that we see again across the board. And we even have platforms like TikTok, which are built and designed around it. So the popularity of TikTok is exactly because it has been designed and structured around this mindless, consumable type of content. So we all got used to mindlessly flicking through video after video after video, and we enjoyed it for good or for bad. I think this is particularly good for video games just because they are so visual, right? We experience video games when we play, just by watching them and immersing ourselves in these worlds and in these experiences. So we just like as much, we experience them just watching them, in a video, if there is an action shot or a particular trick shot, or maybe even something funny like a blooper or something like that. So this is the idea behind micro content and why we went that way. With regard to the fact if it's here to stay, I think yes. And, nowadays, especially, it's very difficult to make predictions, I suppose. We've just seen AI in the last few months, like in the last 6 months, taking over everything and, disrupting completely the technological landscape. But I'm relatively confident that this is going to stay because technology may change and the AI is taking over and things are, moving really fast. But this particular way of consuming content has to do with ourselves as consumers. So we like we said, attention spans are shortening. So we like, to consume this very quick and easy pieces of content. So I think it's the direction for the future.
Yeah, no, it's a good thing to call out too, because like if you think about it, I mean, it's kind of a world culture shift based off of technology and economics and so many other factors at play too. Yeah. Because if you look back, like let's rewind for a quick second, like 70 years. Like, I'm thinking like for just from my perspective of what I know, like America in the 1950s, everything was slow, but it was still relative. Everything felt busy. But now we have so many devices that we're connected with other people, connected with other things, all these notifications. So everything's so much busier. So the idea and concept of having short bite-sized pieces of content seems very applicable. Not just for entertainment purposes, but because of just how people react and stuff. It's like you got to get that attention quick and then move on. Absolutely. Because there's so many other things that you're fighting for. So,
absolutely, yeah.
Good call out there. And you know what? In light of that, I want to kind of like dive in a little bit in terms of like strategy, for example, because you provided some great foundation there, talking about things being busy, platforms, for example, TikTok, that are really focusing on this stuff. And we've all heard like how TikTok and other platforms can be, really great awareness channels. But what are effective strategies to drill down to? So let's say, for example, from what you outlined for what micro content is, how can teams kind of start using this to promote their games? What are some like different ways and systems or whatever that can be done to start promoting their games with micro content?
Yeah. So the idea, I think it's very simple. The concept boils down to just one thing: give a voice to your game. And again, for good or for bad, the big shift that social media brought to the world is that now all of a sudden everybody has a voice, right? Everybody has an audience.
Yep.
Everybody has an opportunity to speak up. and for good or for bad,
Yep.
like you were saying. So in this case, for games and teams and solo developers and indie teams and everybody that has an IP essentially to promote, that wants to showcase, it's a really big opportunity just to make a display of it. And you can create videos just to show cool stuff. You can showcase your unique features. You can literally take this opportunity to really stand out and show why your idea is worthwhile and why people should at least consider it. So the other good thing is that by letting the game speak, so to speak, you'll attract like-minded people. So let's say that you have, say, a strategy game, and you should start showcasing some particular mechanism to trick or to outsmart your opponent. Then the people that will resonate with that type of content is the people that will like your game. So it's a very direct, although indirect, if you want, way to attract the right people to your IP and to your product.
Yeah.
So. I was about to say, from a practical point of view, I guess, as we were saying, it's simple. It's just a matter of creating these short clips, 30 to 60 seconds maybe, and post them a few times per day on the platforms you choose. And I kind of stay vague there because the platform depends on your audience, right? So we like TikTok and YouTube Shorts because they are designed, around the short content. So the short content works very well there. But for example, if you are into crypto or blockchain games, then Twitter all of a sudden becomes much more attractive. Or maybe if you are into retro and games for old timers, maybe Facebook, it's still a very popular platform. So again, it's not necessarily the channel itself. It's more about the idea and the way to convey the message.
Yeah, I think that says a lot too, because we talk time and time again on the show here about like knowing your audience and the importance of that, but also understanding the platform. Sometimes I think we generally levitate. We don't float towards this. We go directly or gravitate towards specific platforms that we're like, oh, look, like, everybody's talking about TikTok, this and that, and how well it can be. But if you're, depending on your audience, if they're not there, if your audience is a much older generation compared to, let's say, a younger generation, maybe TikTok isn't the right place. So it's so good to hear you say in terms of, really just be mindful of your audience. Where are they? Like, that's where you want to be in front of, is where they are. Because if you're in the wrong place, then your message isn't getting out to the right people.
Yeah.
So definitely some really good effective strategies there too. And not only that, you called out to some types of the content in terms of like, hey, showcasing certain features and like, there's lots of different things that can be done there. Especially if you're familiar with certain pain points that people have in a particular genre that you know of and you're addressing that, showcase those moments, right? So many things that you can do with these little pieces of micro content that you're talking about. Great.
A friend of mine once told me something like that, unique is better than best. So I think that really resonates, especially in these scenarios. So you don't necessarily need to be the best game out there, if there is such a thing, because it's so personal, right? Yeah. But even if there was, you don't need to be the best. You just need to be unique and have something that becomes your strength, and people is likely to follow anyway.
Yes, very good point. Very good one. At one point, though, you did mention about in terms of like the process, in terms of like, hey, it's a matter of creating this content and, choosing that platform where your audience is and everything in there. So I would say that, in general, with everything we just discussed, there's definitely a lot to consider, with the strategy. But I'm also curious, how much of a role does a process of creating content impact this strategy? Because I know sometimes creating lots of content, even if it's short form, can be somewhat of a challenge for some people. So how much impact does the actual process play into the strategy as well too?
Yeah, so like you were saying, the thing is that producing content is really time consuming, right? Content is labor intense, and by the way, that's the reason why we offer it as a service. It just makes sense, to help people that don't have the capacity, to help teams or companies that don't have the capacity to do that, to outsource it, and that's what we offer as a service. So the process, like you were saying, impacts the strategy because it more than likely will be the bottleneck. So depending how much you can handle or how much you can invest into outsourcing, that will dictate how many pieces of content you can produce. So how many pieces of content you can post every day or every week. And consequently, the remaining part of the strategy, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you kind of outlined that too, and how it can create that compact. Because sometimes I think what happens is, people address this saying like, "Oh, there's no way I can do this and stuff." And yeah, there are solutions for that too. But really, probably identifying what that process is and kind of evaluating and looking at it can really help determine whether it is or isn't a good fit for you. And then in either case, that doesn't mean to completely disregard and saying, oh, I'm not going to do this now, or I can't do this. It's more of then, well, what are other ways to address it? And like you said, people like yourself can help with that bottleneck, or there could be like other processes involved or whatever it may be. But a good way to approach it is knowing that, yes, that process is impacted to the strategy. And then what's the way you can work? I think I go back to your other comment, even though it was in different context. How can you play into your strengths, your team's strengths, or other things to leverage that ability to then implement that process? And if you can't, find other solutions around it too, because again, that can change everything. So with that said, there's a lot going on in terms of taking this content and doing everything and whatnot. And we have I think a simple understanding of that, but I'm sure there's a lot of pitfalls that people get into when they're trying to, let's say, do too much, bite off more than they can chew, or maybe not have the right approach. So with that said, what would you say are some common mistakes studios make when they're trying to utilize micro content? And what ways can they avoid these mistakes?
Yeah. So, really good question. And you already mentioned one of the big points there in the question itself. So biting off too much is one that happens, I guess, all the time. So people need to be aware that this marketing strategy leans more in the brand building side of things rather than in the direct, response sort of strategies, right? So this is a marathon. It's a long-term game, and you need to be ready first to sustain the effort for as long as it's needed. And it could be 6 months, it could be more. Just be aware, make a plan, and try to figure out for how long you want to do it, and pace accordingly. So another thing that I see people doing oftentimes is coming in with the accountant mentality, right? So coming in straight off the bat and saying, yes, we are going to do this, we are going to invest this much budget, but we want to start seeing a return, after 2 months. And the return needs to increase by this much every 3 months or so. And, they try to force, an economic logic into something that is meant to be more, like I said, on the brand building side of things. So one of the nicer ways I found to put this into words is that this is like real estate investing. So you are essentially claiming your digital real estate bit by bit, brick by brick, if you want, by putting out your snippets of content. And then over time, yes, you'll get a return. It's not necessarily something that you can measure immediately. So it does take a little bit of time to get going and to find the right type of content and to build up those audiences and start to converting them. On the other hand, and that takes again, a little bit of forward vision to understand. There is the fact that this is not a strategy that it's meant to work in itself. And what I mean by that is that once you start with this strategy and you have it going and you start refining and you find the content that resonates the most with people, then you start first having an audience that you can leverage for remarketing and for all sorts of stuff, even lookalike audiences if you want to do advertising or anything like that. Second, you have an idea of what type of creatives to use if you ever want to run ads again. You start knowing your audience much better. You know what resonates with them, you know what keeps them engaged, and you can give them more so that they come back more and they play your game for longer. So it takes forward thinking, like I said, and you need a bit of planning ahead and strategizing ahead to be able to see the benefit. But this is not meant to be an end in itself. It's something that builds your brand so that it can work in synergy with other strategy and elements in your marketing.
Yeah, I'm glad you called that out too, because you're right. This isn't necessarily the only thing that you should be doing and focusing on. It's I think how you close right there is a good point, because it's really about taking that holistic approach, but these are just other kind of tools in your toolbox that you can leverage, right? And because again, if you just focus on one thing like that without the whole concept of taking a holistic approach, it can be very limiting and tiresome. And then I think that idea and concept plays back into what you mentioned too, is it takes time. It takes time to do things. And it is a slow process because it is like putting brick and brick out there. Yeah. Another thing I want to call out that I thought was kind of interesting too, you mentioned a little bit about ads, right? And and that was, I believe, in context with your opening statement of, hey, it takes time to put this together. But there's a really cool, interesting thing that I want to explore a little bit more too that you shared, which was, at least with ads, you can, depending on your budget and everything too, of course, you can definitely, explore things faster or learn things faster. Because like you said, with the creative and maybe depending on the platforms and what you enable, there could be comments about like what your messaging and creative is. And there is just so much learned in that type of format. And again, it's that branding experience, but also a learning experience, because you called out too. Some people, the pitfall they make is, I want this X, like this goal, this number hit by this time and everything else. Yeah. But if you approach it that way, especially with ads, sometimes that's a natural way of thinking, right? But if we look at it from a learning experience, there's so much more that we can discover just from what people are saying and interacting. Because like, do you have any examples of maybe some learnings you found, like, well, not specific, but like, if from these learnings, how can this help you make more informed decisions with other types of campaigns or other types of content or whatever, just from like the learnings you find in ads?
Yeah, so there's another analogy that I use, and it's similar to the previous one. So if the content is like investing in real estate, advertising would be like paying rent, right? Mm-hmm. As soon as you put the money down, you start getting some form of service or I suppose return. But as soon as you stop paying, that's all gone and it's gone immediately. So we have a particular process that I suppose comes from the fact that having been in software for so many years, I have this very logical approach. And anyway, for advertising, I organize things in phases. And in the first phase, I tend to explore a bit more with the messaging. And, I run traffic campaigns instead of conversion campaigns, just to see what resonates with people, what type of creative, what type of messaging, if there's any pain point, if they resonates more with solutions or, future statements, things like that we do for start, stringing things together. So that part is the one that could be, shortened in case you already had, a content strategy that does that for you. Because whenever you put out content, you can see clearly from likes, shares, comments and reactions, if people likes it or not. And, true, there is an algorithm in the platform that plays an element. But, over time, over the course of a month, you can definitely see the trend in what content is resonating most. So, once you have that experience, then it complements very well your ad strategies, because you already know something, and then you can put that straight into your advertising campaign without having to test too much or, stopping in the dark if you want.
Yeah, no, and I loved how you outlined and shared your process a little bit there too, because again, and I think as you just shared, there's numerous ways to approach this, meaning you could start with ads, you could start organically first, but in either case, just sometimes ads, because anything with more money means more, you can learn faster, quicker. You could also fail a lot faster too if you're not careful. Sure. But the point is, there's lots of different ways to approach these things, organic or paid, using this micro content, putting it out there, and then taking that data that you learn and then applying it to the next version. And it's an iterative process, and that's why it does take time. But those learnings can probably compound the results down the road, and everything else. So I'm, again, glad that you shared that whole process and concept, because there's lots of ways to approach it. But I think we could both agree approaching it, at least starting out, with the lens of what can we learn from this is a great way to do it and avoid a lot of other pitfalls. Because there's nothing worse than creating a whole campaign or type of messaging for, let's say, 6 months to realize, oh, we were missing the mark the whole time. Because that's never fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's to be fair, now that you mention it, it was one of my frustrations when I transitioned from being in software to start doing marketing. And, in a way I did it, and I'm happy I did it because it felt exciting to the idea of helping other people to promote their efforts. But at the same time, if you go through a marketing basics, fundamental sort of a training, they talk about, creating this ideal customer, proposition, creating personas, creating this and creating that. And to me, that was just, like I said, stopping in the dark, right? It might have been an educated guess, but it's still a guess. So, it's something that I really struggled with at the beginning. And then, over time, you learn to come to terms with it. But yeah, you need to make your best assumption at the beginning and go out with it, validate it, and it happens that you miss the mark, and you need to go back and refine it and test it again. And it takes a little bit of time, but eventually you get there.
And with that said, I want to go back to another point that you made, and even back to one of your Q-Box answers, which is you mentioned about making a plan. And I think the how I'm relating to that comment to your Q-Box answer was simply the routines. Because part of the plan is creating a routine. It doesn't mean it has to be set in stone, because, I mean, you get something that works, like you said, I have routines. I have a good habit of developing them and making them work. But if it doesn't work for you, you're probably going to be like, okay, how can I change this to make what I'm looking for better, right? So like what your own goals. But the same thing happens with the plan. And it's so good to hear that and probably emphasize that point too, to probably, and as it relates to your system and what you're finding, because that plan doesn't necessarily dictate everything, but it gives you the right direction to move forward. And part of that, well, as we just talked about with the learnings, you look back, assess those things, and then you can make better, more informed decisions in terms of how do I change my course?
Yes.
So again, it's funny because when we talk, about some of these pitfalls, not having these things in place or not having these systems in place are where we can get caught off guard, especially if, way down the road and they were like, oh, how could have we avoided this? A plan is one way to do it.
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's think of this real quick too. Like, in light of going back to the content, some of the strategy and everything else, is there anything that can make this things less overwhelming in terms of specifically like what could a content pipeline look out? And depending on your plan and other things, can that shift down the line? But what's a good thing that people can do, whether it's a system or a routine, to have a good pipeline ahead of them so they don't have to worry about maybe any problems that pop up or life, because that always happens to everybody, right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. And it's such a good question. So I think that the fundamental element for success there is efficiency. So like we were saying, this is labor, this is work, and it's time consuming, right? So you want to make sure that whatever you do, whatever pace you decide to pick, you have systems and strategies in place to be able to run it efficiently. And even if you want to post one clip per day, and that's what you can commit to, then you want to have all the system and people and teams and tasks in place to make sure that even that one runs like clockwork. And this for me is just the basics, and that's something that in my world I call the content conveyor belt, because I really like that idea of content being produced, collected somehow, and then sliced and diced, edited, and then posted, and following that very regular path that makes efficiency and makes the strategy sustainable. So that would be the first key element. But then beyond that, and taking a bit of a broader look, I would say that finding synergies with other strategies and other elements, needs to be part of this game too, right? Like we were saying, you can use content to make easy work and tasks in advertising, for example, and in other marketing strategies. But that's also the other way around. So, for example, your games or game studios are likely to have a lot of footage about their games, and that's something that comes from early tests, or even QA, or just people randomly playing their game, user generated content. So you want to make sure that everything you have would then get to a point in which it gets reassessed and reused and repurposed for micro content, so that you can really start to find that efficiency and some additional ways to leverage the same efforts, so to speak. So synergies with other strategies is a big element. And then one more thing that I want to mention is that the pipeline needs to be substantial. And again, what I mean by that is that, especially for people that is starting off, it's not so much about the quality of the production, about how refined a video is, but how good is the game and how well the clip highlights something unique, something interesting, something funny, something that people is likely to follow and appreciate.
Really, really good points. And folks, just to quickly summarize, I mean, what Roberto said about the content conveyor belt, having that system in place just for that is not only helpful in creating that pipeline, but then leads up to the next point, which is the synergy. Work with that pipeline in itself can have a level of synergy, everything from the process to the messaging. And it's like having that synergy and incorporating into other marketing efforts is going to be really helpful in a bigger picture in terms of how you are actually starting to develop those processes to save time and everything else that you just shared. And then last but not least, excellent point too, these processes are also built to kind of put in, I guess, a gauge or some type of monitoring system for quality. Just because you have a system in place doesn't mean you just need to punch out like anything for the sake of it. You want to make sure it's quality. You want to make sure it lines with the messaging and everything. So those are three key things that I love that you just shared about, because again, we can get caught in this trap of like, okay, we just need to produce content and get it out there. But no, there's so much more that's involved. And through that work, carry it over to other things that you're doing, because it's just going to be that much beneficial for how you're executing your marketing, and just save you time to do things like development and other things that come up.
Absolutely, yeah. Behind the scenes videos, or even geeky stuff like showing partly done animations and stuff like that. One of the things that I like to say is that gamers are in gaming for the sake of games. So it doesn't necessarily need to be highly polished or highly produced, as long as it's unique and it looks interesting and makes for something that connects and resonates with your people, they will be likely to follow you and like it anyway.
Yeah, no, really good point there. All right, so I know we're coming on time here. So before we close, I'd love for you to share any tips or suggestions that you have for our listeners based on what we just discussed.
Yeah, so I think that a first tip that I like to give goes back to the accountant mentality that we discussed before, and it's about the mindset or the angle that you take on your game and on marketing your game. The opposite of that, and probably just as bad, I suppose, would be the naive mentality. They build it and they will come, sort of a thing. I've seen that a few times as well, and people try, to focus on the game, which it's absolutely right. But then you cannot expect to get away just with a one-off sale of $9.99 on your games, because you will need a million of them to be able to cover your development costs. So from that point of view, I think that the happy way in between will be to consider your game like an economy on its own, like almost if it was a business, right? So you need to find the different monetization strategies that work in your game with your people, and be smart about how you place them, how you use them, but maximize them so that you can have a higher lifetime values from your players, and you can spend more in acquiring new players. And then the other one, and that's something that we discussed already, it's running strategy in isolation. The holistic approach, like you were saying, it's something that I'm very fond and I'm really a big advocate of, because especially nowadays, the out there is noisy. There's a lot of competition. Standing out is hard. So trying to come at it from different angles is really key. And then the very last thing that I'm really passionate about is don't forget your mission. Because look, the world is tough out there. There's a lot of nasty people. There's a lot of nasty things happening every single day. And I really believe the games are one of the few ways that we can, use to really put a smile, to really give a break, from awful stuff, to people that, like to play them and, get lost in them, have, their mind wandering and have a little bit of enjoyment in their lives. So I really think that this is key, because gaming people is very passionate and game developers are very passionate. You just need to remind yourself that you're doing it for one reason. So
yeah, no, absolutely. And you know what? I really want to call out to number 2. Even though number 4, that fourth one is amazing, because again, so many people don't think about their mission. But number 2, you mentioned how consider games as if it's an economy of its own, because it's like, I think a lot of times some people might look at that face value and be like, oh, well, I don't want microtransactions. It's like, well, there's so many different ways you can treat your game as if it's economy. I mean, it could be anything from early access to DLC to even having a crowdfunding campaign. There's lots of ways to look at it. But if you approach it with that mindset, like you just said, an economy, that's that can create so many more opportunities and ways to be a lot more resourceful than just simply thinking, hey, I'm putting together a game and then putting it out there and then make sales, because there's still a lot of risk associated with that. So I love that idea there.
Yeah, and especially with microtransaction, I really think you're onto something there. There's a lot of people that have a sort of prejudice against microtransaction, but it doesn't necessarily mean, being nasty or being, trivial or something like that. And, you can incorporate microtransaction in a nice way that flows in your game without making anybody angry because you're blocking them, from getting whatever they want to get. And, it can be subtle and it can be done properly, I suppose. That's
exactly. There are ethical ways to do anything that requires a transaction, regardless of what it is. It's just up to you to find out what that fit is for you, your game, and your audience. So,
absolutely
awesome. Well, before we close and everything, I would again want to let people know that, like I mentioned in the beginning, Roberto has an offer, and basically it's a friends and family discount. So I know that, Roberto, you have lots of different services. I guess you can chime out in terms of what they might be, but basically anybody who's interested in wanting to reach out, connect with Roberto, and possibly work with him, for our listeners specifically, he is offering a friends and family discount. It's just a matter of reaching out to him, letting him know that, hey, I heard you on the show, would love to learn more. And how does that discount apply? Because I know you offer a variety of services. They're kind of like case by case. But again, if listeners come to you and say, hey, I heard you on IGM, you have a very reasonable discount from what I understand that you would be able to extend to them, correct?
Yeah, for sure, Andrew. You do a lot for gaming, for the gaming industry, and for game developers. So I'm more than happy to be part of this and be part of the family. So by all means, if people want to reach out and discuss, a possibility to work together, more than happy to give a family discount for people that is into IGN. You said briefly, about the services. I can easily summarize into three categories. So the one will be the advertising side of things. So just running paid media campaigns on social media. The second will be the content, which has been the main focus of today's discussion. So it shouldn't need any further presentation. And then the third one is that we have a partnership with Fruit Lab, which is a Web3 sort of a gaming content platform, so we can run influencer campaigns in collaboration with them. So it's either advertising, content, or influencers. Those are the three areas in which we feel we can help people the most.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing more insight about those services, but also for extending that that discount, that friends and family aspect. And yeah, I mean, it's good to have other people like you be part of this community too. And I can't thank you enough for extending that offer to our listeners. So again, for anybody who is looking to reach out to Roberto, we'd love you to do so. And Roberto, what are some great ways that can do that? Website, email, what's the best way people can connect?
Yeah, so I have a website, which is levelup-ads.com. There's a form there. You can get in touch through the form. You can book, a call with me through the website. That's one way. I have a Roberto at levelup-ads.com, which is my direct email address, where Roberto is Robert with a final O, just to make it very clear. And then I'm not much into social media, I have to say. I'm on LinkedIn just because from years of being in software, I had the majority of my my network there already. So if you want to reach out on LinkedIn, I try to stay on top of my messages, and you can connect with me and ask me stuff over there too.
Awesome. Well, folks, again, if you want to reach out, those are the best ways to do so and get in contact with Roberto. And that said, Roberto, thank you so much, not only for the offer, but taking the time to share such helpful information with our listeners today. It was really great having you on the show.
No worries. It's been real good fun. So happy to be here and looking forward to the future.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening to another episode of Indie Game Movement. I'm Andrew Pappas, your host, and the show's producer is Mustafa Price. Show notes for this episode can be found by visiting rengenmarketing.com, the number episode of the show. Rengen Marketing is a consulting marketing company that helps indie devs with their marketing efforts. Whether you need guidance with your game's marketing strategy or could use a free marketing plan template, then please visit www.rengenmarketing.com and take action. A special thanks to Dakota Saw for Season 2's opening theme and Melissa Gellis for the new logo design. And as always, thanks for being such great listeners, and we'll see you next time on Indie Game Movement.